there's times where for HR, we know it's tough because it's a little bit gray. We're not sure if we're doing the right thing, and we're probably going to tend to give some grace to the hiring manager to accommodate what they would like to do. But there was no gray area here. This was clearly, as you said about the broadcast, this was clearly a train wreck unfolding before their eyes.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, and this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at goodmorninghr.com. Well, this week, we're going to try something a little different. Rather than have a guest on to talk about just a single topic, we're going to talk about a few hot topics, HR-related news items. If this goes well, we'll probably make it a regular thing. And if it turns into a train wreck, well, you can go to goodmorninghr.com and get a full refund. But if it is a train wreck, there's nobody I'd rather take down with me than my buddy Jimmy Taylor. Jimmy has been a guest on the show. He's executive director of Dallas HR, and right now he and his team are knee-deep in preparing for this October's HR Southwest Conference. But he's also, over his career, been a recruiter, an HR consultant, an entrepreneur, and in fact, he is a co-founder of one of the trailblazing recruitment process outsourcing firms in Texas. And he's also, we've known each other for close to a couple decades, and he's a giant SHRM volunteer. And nobody's ever called Jimmy Giant before. So that's probably a first. So welcome back to Good Morning HR, little Jimmy. I'm glad to have you.
So glad to be here, Mike. I do have to say, every time I come on, based on the introduction, I scratch my head and promise to never do this again. But thrilled to have the conversation. And is there any more time for hot topics in HR than there are today?
Right now. Yeah, it seems like the last 3 years, it's just been, dodging bullets left and right. But there's some interesting stuff going on right now. And so that's why we kind of thought, well, we actually, I'll pull the curtain back here a little bit. We usually record our episodes 6 weeks to 2 months before they actually air, which makes it hard to do a timely topic. And so, if we do this well, so if you don't screw it up, Jamie, it's all on your shoulders. We will probably the last episode of each month just do something local, time local, and see what related to HR stuff. So, but the hot topic right now that everybody's talking about, especially over the last 2 or 3 weeks, is ChatGPT and AI. And, there's a lot of talk about what ChatGPT can do for HR folks and for job seekers. And if you've been under a rock for the last 6 weeks, ChatGPT is a artificial intelligence system that you can type in natural language questions, and it gives you long feedback. And then people are using it to write blog articles and all kinds of information. And some of it's good, and some of it's coming out pretty generic. But I had to write a non-disclosure agreement for a group of TCU kids who we have working on their capstone project for us. And I typed in, give me a non-disclosure agreement for this situation. And it sent it to me. I sent it to one of my buddies who's an attorney, and he said, that's pretty good. It's good enough for TCU students anyway. So it works. And so, but that is we are going to see more and more of it in HR. And I know SHRM has recently had an article about it, and a lot of the HR-related press has covered it. And on the flip side, people are concerned that, okay, well, what does that mean if my candidates are using ChatGPT to write their cover letters? How is that fair? And Jimmy, as a recruiter, what would your response be to somebody with that background and who's a specialist in employee selection issues? What would your concern be? Would you be really worried if the cover letter was written by a robot?
Well, before I jump to my thoughts on that question about the cover letter being written by a robot, I've got to say, I really wasn't familiar with ChatGPT until, I don't know, maybe a couple of months ago when you started telling me about it. And I'm not sure if it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen or the most frightful thing I've ever seen. It is a fascinating topic. But back to the question about the cover letter, Mike, I think it's funny how things are just always go full cycle, right? But the interview process, I believe, is still so manufactured and artificial. I'm not sure just a candidate that uses ChatGPT to write their cover letter is alarming. I think it's just one more step in a relatively flawed process. In fact, I might even go on the candidate side and say, if I'm looking for somebody who's pretty technology savvy and they're using ChatGPT to write that, I can be pretty assured that they're right and they're checking that box. So I don't know how alarmed I am about that, but it is an interesting question for the interview process. I think the question goes deeper though, because certainly they have suddenly access at their fingertips to some questions that they certainly might not be qualified to answer otherwise. And I would think if they had a good handle on the questions that were going to be asked, they could be much better prepared than candidates have been in the past.
And the problem with that is that that's artificial preparation, right? I mean, that's my complaint about resume coaches and a lot of, there are a lot of really good organizations that are helping job seekers out there. But when they're, it's a lot like we hear about, high school students, when we're teaching them to the test, and we're telling them how to answer the questions right or a certain way there's some value there, but also are we really getting to know the candidate? But again, like I think you and I are on the same page. The issue isn't the technology. The issue is you as a manager, you probably suck at interviewing. You're not preparing for it. You're not writing you're not thinking through what are the competencies that I need to uncover. What are the core behaviors that I need to, dig into and understand about this candidate, and to really understand, how they've solved problems in the past like this and how they've operated in an environment like ours and what do they bring that's unique to the table. When we just tell me about a time in your career where you had a conflict with a teammate. Okay, so yeah, good for you. You took a behavioral interviewing class 20 years ago, but that doesn't tell you if this guy's going to be a good engineer or not.
Mike, have you been sitting in on my interviews again?
Yeah, and you won't hire me, so I'm doing something wrong.
No, I totally agree with you. And it not that this topic is around recruiting, but we'll stay on recruiting just for a moment. I mean, it goes back to what we know to be true, and that is if we have a chance to really do in-depth interviewing that's based on the skills needed for the role, things that they can't fake just through an answer. And if we have strong referral sources, including our own employees in terms of the candidates that are being brought in, we know those folks are going to perform higher. They're going to stay with us longer. They're going to be more engaged while they're on the job. I mean, it goes back to the truths we already know about what great recruiting looks like. So is it a game changer? It's interesting. I don't know that we've thought through it all, but I don't know that it's going to improve or take away from the current interview process, because I think you got it right. It's the skills of that individual interviewer that really matter.
And that willingness to dive deep, to go back to the BEI type language, to unpeel that onion, dig deeper, and make a real connection with the candidate, and really understand, what their motivations are and those kinds of things. But from either the interviewer point of view or the candidate's point of view, one of the cool things that I've seen people doing with ChatGPT is give me a list of questions that I should ask in a job interview with an engineering candidate. And it's actually pretty good at it. It comes up with, at least those starter questions to start to flesh stuff out. And it's never said, would you rather be a dog or a cat? It didn't ever give me that kind of dumbass question that people ask, Stallone or The Rock, which one would you be? Those kind of things. So So at least it's got that going for it.
Yeah, don't you think it really speaks to the opportunity to really automate some pretty simple tasks within HR and really transform the work that we do? When I think about, you sent me an excerpt from questions you had asked, and when you asked for suggestions on how to implement a ChatGPT process, the implementation steps were wonderful. Think about all the things that we could do differently as HR leaders in using that kind of technology to make our lives better and make our teams' lives more fun, more productive.
And for listeners who have not played with it yet, I'll include a link to the OpenAI website, and anybody can access this right now. I'm paying for a subscription to ChatGPT 4, and I think it's like $20 a month, which is the latest language model that they've got, and it's come out in the last couple of weeks, and it's incrementally, significantly, or almost exponentially better than the 3.5 of the previous version. But so I asked it, what problems might arise from using AI in human resources? And it gave me probably 150 words back, but it highlighted bias, which is definitely, that goes back to that, if you've got bad processes and you automate them, all you're doing is automating bad processes. And so if we train AI, not just ChatGPT, but the AI in our employee selection process, that more and more ATSs are coming out with what they call AI, which is often just a keyword search, but sometimes it really is. They are trying to implement some sort of artificial intelligence and really develop who your best candidates are. But if you're feeding them a bunch of demographic information that's not really relevant to the job, what you may end up with is a bunch of 6'1" white guys with blue eyes, and that's not a predictor that that they're going to be a great accountant or a great engineer.
Absolutely.
But it recognized that it said AI algorithms can perpetuate and even amplify existing biases, and then it said lack of transparency, privacy concerns. How are you collecting this data and using it? And I think that's here in the Texas legislature right now, Representative Cabriglione has got a bill dealing with privacy issues related to data collected by companies and how we use it. And then legal challenges it mentioned. And that's, again, if we're creating if there are disparate outcomes based on, trash in, trash out, and if what we're sending into the process is bad, and the ethical concerns around it. People hate processes that they feel like are automated and not personalized, and I think that's
absolutely
a real problem.
Yeah, one more thought I had is I've been thinking about this artificial intelligence issue. It's and I haven't seen any information and certainly no research on it yet, but every time a disruptive technology like this comes out, it's always predicted to be a killer of jobs in the marketplace. And certainly I think some jobs will definitely change within HR teams based on technologies like this. But what's your view on whether it'll add to or take away from net jobs? Because, and this one may be different, right? But IBM did some work years ago, and they analyzed disruptive technologies. And I think I was a recruiter a long time ago when technology really started to make an impact on recruiting. And as the internet really took hold, the belief, the common theme was recruiters' jobs were going to go away. Because anybody connected with anybody, and we wouldn't need them to find people and make the introduction. I would argue that today recruiters' jobs have probably never been more important than they are today. So I wonder about that with artificial intelligence. Some jobs are going to go away, but do you think it's going to add to the number of jobs overall, or do you think it's going to take some away?
Well, I think like with recruiters, I think bad recruiters, people who aren't really good at their job, ought to be really afraid of this, like they would any other technology. But really good recruiters who add value, who aren't just doing post and pray, and that kind of approach to just, who aren't just sorting resumes or applications all day and just doing an administrative clerical approach to recruiting. And there's so many recruiters out there aren't very good at it. I mean, who really do, back when when I was, involved in recruiting and frontline HR, I expected that a recruiter was going to go find a candidate, not just wait for a candidate to stumble in drunk and fall down in front of my desk, and then maybe I'd hire them. And I think a recruiter who is smart and can use the data that's available and use AI to identify really strong candidates that they can reach out to cold, candidates and reach out to them, and really, I think they're going to excel. And I think it goes the same way with, everybody complains they can't get answers from their HR department because HR is understaffed. And so I've got a question about my benefits. If you get a really smart AI system with a with a chatbot interface that and somebody can jump on my intranet or the network at the inside the company and say, what is my maximum HSA contribution this year? They don't have to talk to a person, and it can spit it out. Okay, what forms do I need, and just follow up, and that's perfect. I mean, and I don't think it's going to be a net jobs killer because I think every piece of technology we've seen, sure, there's not many people out there creating buggy whips anymore, but there are, the industries that came after needed a different set of skills, and the smart people went out there and got those skills. And I think that's who's going to hurt the most, is people who aren't either in a position or aren't willing to, constantly change their skills. You shared with me an article around, around that Suzanne Lucas, I think, wrote, that, who's also been a guest, wrote, about the death of the degree, and is are college degrees really, we are definitely keeping this video in the in the podcast. So if you're listening just to the podcast, go find the video, because the Jimmy was sitting too still in his office and the lights turned out because the motion detector, and so he was waving his arms. And I'm saying this now just so that Rob, our producer, has to include this piece in the podcast. You've got to see Jimmy waving his arms.
Normally, I actually fall asleep before that happens, so that's too bad.
But I think this is really going to be an expander of jobs, and I think the folks who embrace the technology and find new and innovative ways to use it to make HR more efficient. I mean, we've talked about HR wanting a seat at the table for all these years, but we can't get out of the transactional stuff. But now, as soon as they want to take the transactional stuff away from us, we're screaming, "Oh no, that's my job! I need job security." And so I think but I think that's just the reality. Lower skill jobs are always going to get replaced by technology eventually, because they're so expensive, and that's just the reality. So what does that mean? It means you got to go out there and build your skills. And smart companies who have those people on board already are who maybe need a skills upgrade, but they hopefully will realize it's better to upgrade those skills and on the company dime than go find some, let this person go and go find somebody, who already has those skills. A lot of this stuff we can train our people to do. People want to grow. People want to grow professionally. They want to learn new skills. That's what one of the keys to happiness is. When you read about happiness, it's that ability to continue developing in your areas of strength. And if an employer does that, you get better engagement. And so these are all just tools that we can use. I'm having lunch next week with a young man who's a graphic artist who's really in the last 6 months embraced a lot of AI stuff. And what he's doing with AI is just amazing on the graphics art side. And even though it still wants to give people 6 fingers, I don't know if you've noticed that, but a lot of the AI generated art ends up with people having 6 fingers or 2 earlobes on one side or something. So, but
I have to start looking for that.
Yeah, it's an ugly rabbit hole, and because so much of the AI is trained off of what's on the internet, a lot of the art that's generated isn't safe for work. Just you have to kind of be careful, because sometimes if the internet was your actual model, sometimes things come back. But the other thing, I asked what are potential benefits. I asked ChatGPT, what are potential benefits of AI? Improved efficiency, enhanced accuracy, which if you've got good models and good data. And it's funny because it said one of the risks was bias, but then it also said one of the potential benefits was unbiased decision making, and I think that makes a lot of sense too. If especially on the pre-screening end of looking at candidates, the ability to intentionally ignore what college they went to, or even zip codes and things like that we pick up on, or spellings of names or other things that suggest cultural, relationships that we don't want our hiring managers to take into account. If we can remove some of that, and personalized experiences, the more, everybody complains about big data and everything that all these companies know about us, but if I can make my candidate who I've never met, and if they hit our site and I'm powered by an AI on the back end that already knows a little bit about them or can learn about them quickly and make this a really personalized experience, even if it's automated, that seems like a no-brainer, right? As far as a recruitment and that's the first impression into the organization. And of course, it mentioned cost savings, predictive analytics, and knowing, having that idea to know AI is smart enough to say, okay, well, given the age of your population and your past, insurance claims and all of this is what this is what you should budget for this year, and for it just to do that for you on that front end, and it did say better candidate matching, which makes sense too.
Yeah, that predictive piece is particularly interesting if you think about how much information, how much data is really available now, and you wire that into the predictive component of the workforce. I mean, it's almost impossible to really think about all the ramifications and potentially all the improvements that you could see over time. I'm sure there's going to be some work to get there, but I'm pretty impressed with it.
And then finally, you mentioned it, but I asked it, if an HR leader wanted to cautiously implement AI, what are some tips? And it said start small, which is always good advice, right? Let's do a pilot. Let's see what it does. Let's measure the outcomes. See if they make sense. Evaluate the data. Involve stakeholders. And when everybody goes back to that plan, do, check, act, that model and everything. But yeah, get your stakeholders on board and include them in the process. It said monitor and evaluate the process, communicate clearly about how we're using AI and HR and how it may impact their work, and then keep human involvement, balance AI with human input. So, I don't think
that one sounded a little self-serving.
Huh? Yeah. Well, the artificial intelligence said, yeah, keep us involved, but keep the humans involved too. And, well, we don't want the Terminator movie, right? I don't want to go to work and have be greeted by the metal robot with the red eyes and, Skynet, signing my check. So, I want some human involvement in it too, but I am not panicking about AI the way I'm seeing some folks online do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, again, it's disruptive, so it will change things. Technology always does. But I think I think there's some tremendous benefits coming from it. I think panic would be the wrong reaction until artificial intelligence includes a postscript that says, get rid of the people. Then when I read that in the chat, then I'm going to probably get a little bit more worried.
Yeah, you could probably eliminate positions like executive director of large nonprofits, especially HR-related ones. But beyond that, I did ask it, will AI eliminate the need for HR-related podcast hosts? And it said, as long as you're not Mike Coffey, you're probably safe. So I thought that was a little over-personalized, but it did say that humans can bring things to the table like creativity, empathy, and the ability to connect with an audience on a personal level. And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, premium background checks with fast and friendly service. 24 years ago, I founded Imperative to help risk-averse companies make well-informed decisions about the people they involve in their business. Often that involves giving employers thorough and easy-to-understand background checks on prospective employees. But sometimes it means helping families make well-informed decisions when hiring nannies or other caregivers. And outside of employment, we help services firms with their client acceptance and know your customer requirements. And we help investors research the principles and firms in which they are considering making private equity placements. Basically, if people are involved, there's risk involved. We help companies identify and mitigate that risk. You can learn more about Imperative at imperativeinfo.com. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 3/4 of a recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Research Credits. Then select episode 89 and enter the keyword HR Southwest. That's all one word, HR SOUTHWEST. And now back to my conversation with Jimmy Taylor. Well, let's go on to topic number 2 out of the news. So UPS found itself in hot water. It's really a rare thing when the EEOC, it's a rare thing when the EEOC wins a case, if we're going to be honest. They lose a lot of the cases that they take to court that actually get before a judge and don't settle. But then they won a case in summary judgment, which is like, the judge just said, we don't even need to have a trial here because UPS screwed this up so bad. They had an employee who came on board, and the guy's name was Mark Fowler. He was diabetic, and he told them during the interview, I will need to take short breaks during the day to measure my insulin and, maybe eat an orange or whatever. And they said, no problem, Mark. We would love to have you here at UPS. First day on the job, the HR supervisor comes up and says, we got some concerns about this, and we think you may be unfit for this position because of your disability. Okay, that's somebody with HR in the title, and they said it that way. Alarm bells should be going off at that point. And then the HR supervisor suggested, I think we should move you to a temp position. Okay, the guy's got a disability, and now we want to move you to a temp position instead of the job we just, on day 1. And he refused. And then the next day, day 2 of employment, the HR supervisor leaves a voicemail on his phone saying that if he didn't accept a temp position, his second day on the job would be his last. I'm not accepting the temp position, so I guess I'm not going back to work. And he assumed that was, you said this is my last day, so I'm not going back to work. And then, so he didn't go to work. And UPS fired him. They said he abandoned his job. And the court agreed that he was fired for the disability, right?
There are some stories that a plaintiff attorney must read that and go, this is just too good to be true. Somebody is scamming me on this. That couldn't really happen.
Oh, my gosh. And so what did UPS do wrong here, Jimmy?
Well, Mike, I don't know where to start, but I guess it seems like there's a pretty clear lack of training for first level managers in some basic recruiting and management principles that actually just happen to coincide with law. But I guess it's indicative maybe of just how much work we still really actually have to do in leading and developing managers. Because if you said just give me one thing they did wrong, it's just poor management, and we all see that, right? It happens so often. And look, managers are busy; they're doing a ton of things. It's a tough mantle of leadership that they wear. We get that, but for a manager to be so unaware of the legal and just good human practices of how to manage someone, In this case, it's simply stunning. So I guess that's the first place they went wrong. I don't know if we're going to go through the whole list. We could be here all day.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's the judge's opinion in the summary judgment decision was 22 pages long. That's and when you're the when you're on the losing side of that, 22 pages is not a good judgment. I mean, that's not a good decision. Yeah, you're right. Just treating people like people would be a good start, but if during the interview an applicant tells you, "Hey, I've got a disability," okay, well, let's go right now. Let's not just say gloss over it. Okay, well, that's not a problem. We don't have any problem with that. That's fine. If they tell you, what's a really good thing to do? Let's start the interactive process right now. Let's find out. Okay, great. You're our ideal candidate, and we're going to make you this offer. So now let's talk about the accommodations. What do you really need? And let's go through it at the right time. Let's go through the ADA interactive process and figure out how to make you successful in this role. And stepping away from the job a few times a day to check your insulin and do, okay, no, that's an easy accommodation. It's not, it's not like he said, I need to juggle chainsaws for half an hour every day. This is something simple.
Not only, Mike, is it a reasonable accommodation that's very easy, but very likely all they had to do is ask, how did FedEx handle this? Because he had, and then we don't know for sure that he was in the same role. He was a package loader, so we don't know if he was in the same role for FedEx, but if he were in the same role, certainly it seems like a reasonable question to find out what the accommodation looked like. Maybe it was unusual. Maybe instead of a quick, finger prick that we really think of, maybe there was something about his condition that took him away from the job for 30 minutes. It doesn't feel like it, but there could be more there. But at least kind of digging deep into how that had worked for a similar role with a similar company seems like it would have been a prudent interview question.
Yeah, and they said it would be a safety issue, but they didn't go through the interactive process at any level. So maybe it was. I mean, I don't know this guy, but even if there was a legitimate issue, you go through the interactive process and then you determine that. And when you fail to go through the interactive process, on its face, you violated the ADA when you make a decision based on somebody's disability. And so, and they hired him, and then they do it, and then they leave the other rule is if you're gonna be an a-hole, do it verbally. Don't write it down, or don't send an email or leave a voicemail. Okay, and when you leave a voicemail on somebody's phone saying this, the second day, if you don't do this, your second day on the job is going to be your last. Okay. That's Exhibit A. I mean, I'm not telling you people do bad stuff to avoid litigation, but don't put the bullet in the gun and hand it to somebody, and just think about what you're doing. But clearly, nobody in this process was thinking. In this poor plaintiff in this case just got the short end of the stick. And so it goes, like you said, back to management training. But this was also an HR supervisor, and so what the heck is going on in HR over there when I first read it, my first thought was, and I would almost bet money on it, this was an HR supervisor who was being led to accommodate the manager. The hiring manager had an idea, had an opinion, and we don't want HR to have the reputation of being Dr. No. And HR's got this reputation, they're always the police. And so, I would almost bet that you'd had a very different circumstance if the HR supervisor had felt empowered to push back a little bit and to tell management, no, let's go through this process and let's do it this way. I don't want to throw her under the bus completely, because I've just seen too many HR people get stepped on by ill-informed managers, and I think that's one of the things HR needs to do a lot better job of is insisting that managers get educated in the process, and sometimes it's on the job. Well, let me explain. I always say HR is your risk advisor, not your risk manager. Your risk managers are that frontline supervisor all the way up to your CEO, the people who are actually making those decisions about how people are, treated in the real world. But HR definitely has that responsibility to step up and say, if you do this, here's what the potential consequences are.
Right. Particularly when it's so overboard. I mean, this was not close. This was a clear-cut violation that the only way they would avoid some kind of legal action is if the employee just decided not to pursue it, right? But certainly, there's times where for HR we know it's tough because it's a little bit gray. We're not sure if we're doing the right thing, and we're probably going to tend to give some grace to the hiring manager to accommodate what they would like to do. But there was no gray area here. This was clearly, as you said about the broadcast, this was clearly a train wreck unfolding before their eyes.
And we've made it 2/3 of the way down the track, and we haven't thrown the train off the tracks yet. So let's see if we can do it this time. Our last topic I have entitled, "Has the NLRB Lost Its Freakin' Mind?" So back in February, the National Labor Relations Board came out with the McLaren Macomb decision that basically said severance agreement, the non-disparagement and confidentiality clauses and severance agreements can infringe on National Labor Relations Act Section 7 rights. In other words, you can't have an agreement that on separation that limits an employee's ability to engage in or support union-related activities and to improve in their opinion, the workplace and the working conditions of their peers. And so it's certainly saying that this company treats its employees badly would violate a non-disparagement agreement and an overly broad confidentiality clause. You can't talk about your separation agreement. You can't talk about the details of your severance agreement. You can't talk about how what the company's policies with regard to people are. Confidentiality clauses. Well, the NLRB said that those infringe on Section 7. So when that came out, a lot of people thought, well, that's probably overstepping. And the real issue is these people are no longer employees. So how are we violating their rights to organize a union if they're no longer employees? And the board kind of addressed that a little bit. But there were probably still ways to do it. So, have those confidentiality clauses and things and say, well, but none of this is meant to limit your Section 7 rights. And you definitely should have the right to fully do those. Well, this past week, Jennifer Abruzzo, their general counsel, came out with a new guidance to the regional offices at NLRB and said, well, let's go even further. This decision from February from the board is retroactive to all previously issued severance agreements. So every severance agreement ever issued that's still in effect could be impacted and is potentially illegal under the National Labor Relations Act, according to the NLRB's current position. And she also said that it may include non-compete clauses. And I read her actual guidance, and she said, my opinion is this, this ruling may also affect non-compete clauses, no solicitation clauses, no poaching clauses, liability releases, covenants not to sue. And she didn't give any legal reasoning for why she thought all those things should be lumped in under this decision. So Jimmy, has the NLRB lost its freaking mind?
I don't know, Mike. I got to tell you, when I read this one, and I had not heard this, and I really wasn't aware of it until you sent it my way. This was so bizarre, especially about the opinion. The date being irrelevant. Agreements signed prior to 2/21/23 were impacted by that. Not only are they impacted by that, but the company has the obligation to go back and inform those employees that their agreements were overly broad and advising them that they're null and void. and they won't enforce the agreements or pursue any penalties. I mean, it's stunning, and I would be surprised if it's upheld when it's challenged, but I don't know. I'm almost speechless on that one.
Well, and the thing is, this is a federal government agency, and they're very good at overreach. And the Biden administration, when they came into office, said one of their big concerns were non-compete agreements, and so this is kind of an oblique way of dealing with some of those things. Maybe the good news, I think, is that the Chevron deference, that legal concept that courts should defer to administrative agencies' rules and policies and interpretations is really getting watered down. And especially the Supreme Court is not real big on it. And a lot of federal courts are pushing back that Congress needs to do its job. And it's, and if this is really what the law, what the agency thinks the law needs to be, then Congress needs to go rewrite the law to include that, rather than letting agencies, the administration, that branch of government, just create law and policy out of whole cloth. So that's the good news. But what I'm afraid of is, okay, so we've got a Democrat in the White House right now, so the administration is generally, NLRB especially, is going to be generally pro-employee. So we get a Republican in next term, or the term, at some point in the future, and it swings back the other way. And rather than having court decisions or new laws that require this, they interpret this way, we just get a new NLRB decision that says, "Oh no, forget all of that. Go back to what you were doing before. Everything's fine." And then we just swing back and forth like we do with Weingarten rights now, with the whether a non-union employee has a right to have a representative in during conversations with management about performance and other kinds of issues. It depends on who's in charge, and it changes back and forth. And so now if every time I sign a severance agreement, its validity depends on who the next president is.
And what the future rulings will be.
Right. Yeah. It's just nuts. And then the other thing is, okay, if I can't have a severance agreement, the whole point of paying somebody the money in a severance agreement is to settle any claims. And
be done and move on. Right.
Yeah. And if I can't do that, I'm not writing those checks. So there's going to be a lot of, if severance agreements become almost impossible to do, well, then what that really means is who's going to pay a severance anymore? I mean, if I don't get as an employer anything for it, if I can't prevent myself from any potential liability in the future, if I can't pay it right now, I can't just say, hey, let's just make a clean break. Then the people who are really going to lose are the 99% of the people who were never going to file a claim anyway. But if I can't get anything as an employer for that money, am I going to write a check?
Mike, you seem to be implying that sometimes federal overreach leads to unintended consequences that actually harm the constituents they're trying to serve. But surely I'm mischaracterizing that position.
Yeah. You're totally mischaracterizing everything I'm saying there. But yeah, I just, as an employer and somebody who works with lots of employers, this will throws so much uncertainty into that employee-employee relation that, when we're terminating, it's already a sticky situation when we're terminating somebody's employment, whether it's for a cause or because of economic situations in the organization, we're just laying people off or whatever. And this one actually happened. The McLaren Macomb decision really came out of a COVID era healthcare organization that had to lay people off. And so you're laying people off. They're not even employees. And so now the NLRB's jurisdiction goes way beyond just the beginning and end of termination, employment relationship. So I don't know how it's going to end up. The good news is that she did at least acknowledge it doesn't apply to supervisors, except that we do need to always remember that you can't retaliate against supervisors who are acting in accordance with with laws. You can't do stuff, But other than that, you can still do and most of your severance agreements, really, if we're going to be honest, especially the confidentiality and non-competes and all those things. Those are generally supervisors, higher level people who aren't, the rank and file type union members. Although, I've seen severance, I've seen confidentiality clauses and non-compete clauses for janitors and stuff like that. So, some companies are really broad with that, and I would advise against that. Any other thoughts about that issue?
No, this will be an interesting one to watch. Because as you think about the ramifications, obviously over time, it's a position that will extend way beyond concerted activities and the control of those things. And, the repercussions could be pretty severe, but I think there's probably a lot of water that's got to go under that bridge before we really know the impact of this particular ruling. But as the article talked about, it's pretty jaw-dropping.
Yeah, and what I will also add here, and I should have said at the front, neither Jimmy or I are attorneys. We both decided to keep our souls. Jimmy kept his by not becoming an attorney, and I actually had to hawk mine. But in 3 more easy payments, I'll have my soul back soon. So but we're not attorneys, so go talk to your legal counsel, because this is in effect immediately. It's not like they gave us a July 31st and a future date when it would be active. They said, in fact, right now, the general counsel is basically saying all of our previous severance agreements were violations of the act. And so go talk to your counsel and make sure that you're acting under color of their advice, and do that. But, hey, Jimmy, we made it. We made it through a whole episode, and
no complete train wrecks, but we got close a couple of times.
We tried. We'll get better. But hey, thank you so much, Jimmy, for being on the first HR News podcast. I got to come up with a better term. So listeners, give me a better term for our monthly HR News Good Morning HR issue, because HR News is news you can use is a little cheesy. So we'll keep working on that. But listeners, thank you for doing your job, listening. You can comment on this episode or search our previous episodes at goodmorninghr.com. or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcast. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and you can reach him at robmakespods.com. And thank you to Imperative's marketing coordinator, Marianne Hernandez, who keeps the trains running on time. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, unless we get canceled. And until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.